You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
Standing on Itaparica Island today with the sea breeze brushing past the ramparts of the old fort of São Lourenço, it's easy to be lulled by the slow rhythms of Bahia. But beneath these waters and stones lies a deeper, darker current, one that stretches back to a fleeting empire built on commerce, ambition, and blood. In the early 1640s, this very island witnessed one of the most brutal episodes of Dutch colonial rule in Brazil, as recorded by the humanist Caspar Barleyus in his homage to Governor John Maurice of Nassau-Siegen. Dutch troops cut down and killed all male citizens who could bear arms, and only women and children were spared. It was not an isolated act, but part of a calculated strategy of terror meant to subdue Portuguese resistance in the wake of mounting unrest. This contradiction between enlightened rhetoric and calculated cruelty is at the heart of Barleyus's vision of Dutch Brazil. Writing in 1647, Barleyus praised Nassau as a modern Caesar, bringing reason and order to the tropics. He compared the Dutch colony to a new Rome, with Recife as its capital and the House of Nassau as its moral compass. But beneath this classical dressing was a raw Machiavellian logic. Empire, Barleyus understood, depended on the delicate management of fear and favor, forza and amore. Barleyus did not shy away from acknowledging what drove the colonial project: ambition, commerce, and the desire to rule. In his words, where the desire for wealth has found a way, ambition will follow. Where trade settles in a desirable location, ambition to rule will be found at its side. Brazil's forests and sugar mills weren't just profitable, they were the staging grounds for a grand imperial vision, one that turned the Dutch Republic into a global power. But such ambition required an outlet. Like Machiavelli before him, Barleyus saw colonial expansion as a way to channel potentially dangerous desires, profit, prestige, and domination outward. It was a model that allowed the Dutch Republic to preserve liberty at home while projecting force abroad. This strategy of redirection is eerily familiar to observers of 20th century US foreign policy. Much like the Dutch in Brazil, the United States has long married commercial interests with geopolitical expansion, often under the banner of freedom or civilization. From the Cold War to the War on Terror, American interventions have likewise blurred the line between idealism and imperialism, projecting power while justifying it with moral narratives. The fort where you now stand, São Lourenço, was first laid out by Dutch engineers during the period Nassau found himself in Brazil. A symbol of strength and surveillance, it guarded not only the bay, but the ideology behind Dutch control. Commerce must be defended and resistance must be crushed. After the Portuguese reconquest and later during Brazil's independence struggle, the fort changed hands and meaning, but its origins remain a visible marker of that earlier imperial logic. Barleyus's account justifies the destruction of Itaparica by drawing on Roman precedents. Inspired by the example of ancient Rome, he wrote, Dutch forces laid waste to territories to pacify their enemies. Nassau, in Barleyus's telling, believed it safer to make friends instead of slaves, yet when friendship failed, terror was employed without hesitation. The massacre on this island then has become an example of how Republican empire reconciles violence with virtue. Barleyus tried to distance himself from full-blown Machiavellianism. He wrote of moderation, of the dangers of greed, of the need for piety and honest rule, but ultimately he acknowledged that in a world of shifting power and constant threat, necessity has no law. Nassau's decisions, however brutal, were framed as acts of prudence. Virtue not in the classical sense of righteousness, but in Machiavelli's sense, the ability to act decisively when the moment demands it. Today, as Brazil reckons with the legacies of colonization, slavery and resistance, Itaparica's fort stands as a silent witness to that imperial past. The Dutch Empire in Brazil may have lasted just over 2 decades, but its logic of expansion masked as enlightenment, of brutality rationalized through strategy, echoes in later empires, from London to Washington. The Dutch experiment in Brazil foreshadowed modern imperial dynamics. It revealed how republics founded on liberty and trade can, and perhaps must, drift into empire under the pressures of ambition and fear. And it showed how Machiavelli, far from being a footnote of Renaissance thought, remains a silent architect of global power. Barrios concluded that a weak and exhausted rule resorts to the sycophancies and villainies of the Machiavellians, and yet Dutch Brazil, from its founding to its fall, depended precisely on those same tactics. The fort of São Lourenço, once a Dutch construction and later a symbol of Brazilian independence, reminds us that every empire, no matter how principled in appearance, must confront the violence at its core. From the sugar mills of Pernambuco to the oil fields of the Middle East, the empire lives on, not always as a territorial possession, but as a strategy, a worldview, and a temptation. Barrios's Brazil was a fleeting chapter. The patterns it helped crystallize endure, and here, like in Fallujah, Gaza, or the Banda Islands, it is in the ground beneath your feet.